Welcome to TrineDay's The Journey, conversations with publisher Kris Millegan. I am Bruce DeTorres. With us is John Klyczek, author of School World Order, the Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education, available at TrineDay.com and the usual sellers. His scholarship focuses on the history of global eugenics and Aldous Huxley's dystopic novel Brave New World. And now, Kris Millegan.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And thank you, Jake, for coming on. I really appreciate this. Everybody's got things to do. And now we did School World Order, and it's getting out there. They're supposedly making a copy in Japan. They keep working on it. I haven't gotten the final word yet. And, I found it to be a completely scary, scary book. What has been the response on it that you've gotten?
Yeah, it's been wide ranging. Definitely a lot of similar sentiments in terms of it being sort of a scary book. I've actually gotten it some attention in like mainstream academia. I did a conference in Poland back in 2023 at Jagiellonian University. It's the oldest university in Poland. I think Copernicus and one of the Pope John Pauls went there as well. I was invited by Professor Gary Robson. And it's also gotten some attention by some unions. There was a time when I was in collaboration with Lois Weiner, who was very active in I can't remember if it's the NEA or the AFT now. I haven't been in touch with her for a while. But then there's also been, a wide response just from, actually, I got an email this morning from somebody who's interested in, I'm now offering some tutoring services, private tutoring services. So there's been a lot of responses just from, families and, general public interested in information about what they can do to maybe get their kids in a spot where they can avoid some of this stuff.
Right. So, what do you see happening in the future? Your book is, looking at some of the future things, but also, some things that are happening right now. But what do you see happening in the future?
Well, I'm actually working on an article to sort of uh, give my perspective on what I think the incoming Trump administration is going to do with education at this time. I'm hoping to get this thing published no later than the end of the month, hopefully, maybe sooner than that. And largely what I'm digging into is looking at sort of the education reforms laid out in Project 2025, which relate to the dismantling of the Department of Education, and then a school choice platform that's going to involve what they call education savings accounts, and then other tax credits. These are just schemes for funneling public tax dollars into private corporations, private schools, even religious schools, which would then bring federal strings attached to them. So, and some of the provisions laid out for the tax credits involve a bill that's been on the table called the Educating Children for Choice Act, ECCA. I might have mixed up the two C's there. It might be Choice for Children or something. But what they plan to do there is create these SGOs. They're called scholarship granting organizations. They already exist, but they want to give them provisions where corporations, they can donate to these SGOs. Those corporations will then get a tax credit on that, and then the SGOs will put that money into what they call scholarship funds that school choice funds that students can use to go to different schools, maybe charter schools, maybe private schools, maybe religious schools, or maybe to pay for private tutoring services. And also other educational products. So, anything that could fall under the whole basket of ed tech products I've laid out in my book. And some of those SGLs are already sort of operating under what are called pay for success or social impact investments. And so this is basically these scholarships in many instances will be given out on the basis of students fulfilling basically workforce quota outcomes for sort of this planned economy moving into the fourth industrial revolution. And I look at sort of the history behind that and how a lot of the people involved in this platform, including Heritage and the American Legislative Exchange Council, are sort of, they have a long history of moving in this direction. Of course, you can read much about it in my book. So that's where I see the Trump administration moving us further into technocracy through school choice privatization.
Well, now, one of your mentors, Charlotte Iserbyt, she worked in the Department of Education in the Reagan administration, right?
Yes, sir.
And how does what the work she was doing then, how does that relate to today?
Okay, so when she was at the Department of Education, she was always nosing around, looking in file cabinets and things, and sort of making things not run as smoothly as people like her bosses, Donald Sinise, would have liked. So they moved her around a lot in different offices, different programs. One of them was a privatization program. It was basically one of the early iterations of what we now know as the larger school choice platform. But they also had her in education technology, and both of these things kind of come together. So she blew the whistle on something called Project BEST, that's basic education skills through technology. And this sort of laid the groundwork for setting up public-private partnerships between big tech corporations and government-run schools to implement computerized education that would utilize operant conditioning algorithms to psychologically condition the students for basically workforce outcomes. And so those two things sort of come together or are just getting sort of putting another foot forward in this movement towards integrating sort of the ed tech data mining through the private school choice. It's funny because, Trump claims that he knows nothing about Project 2025. He has nothing to do with it. He hasn't read it on purpose, things like that. Charlotte used to tell me that on day one, if in the Republican administration, everybody gets a Heritage Foundation playbook. Like that's basically going to be the platform that's going to be setting the basis for policies in all the various executive agencies. And I'm sure the first time around that happened when he was there, and I'm sure he remembers that. And also the reason why I say that is because one of the people on his transition team was Edwin Meese. Edwin Meese, a Council for National Policy guy, he was also on the Reagan transition team or part of the Reagan administration, sort of. So it's the same people, it's the same agenda. And I'm pretty sure that he's just that's empty rhetoric, that he does know that he knows about it, and that we're basically going to move the football a few more yards down the field this time around.
Well, now, there's some good things in computerized education and being able to do independent study and stuff like that. And so, are they mixing the good with the bad, or what's your thoughts?
For me, the sort of the crux of what makes an education technology pernicious or not ultimately has to do with the data mining. So the extent to which there is data mining, and then the extent to which that is used for psychological conditioning or broader social engineering using group dynamics, etc. And as I don't think I could have wrote this book or done much of the research I've done over the last, several years without computer and internet. I mean, I have access to, Department of Education records, FBI records, CIA records, Club of Rome records. I can go to these basically primary sources for all these organizations sitting all in one spot at home, right? I don't have to go to a library and then pull out the microfiche, and then, right, you have a keyword search on a computer so you can really expedite, right? As opposed to using an index, which sometimes is not exhaustive or you don't have one at all. So just in terms of using technology to broaden our access to information, our ability to sift through it on our own and develop our own, critical thinking skills, that, theoretically, we could have designed all this stuff to not have all these backdoors for data mining, for behavioral ads and psychological profiling, ultimately leading up to sort of this digital social credit system in which your access to the public square and private commercial services are dictated based on the algorithms we've extracted from all these devices we're using all the time. So in my book, one of the reforms I suggested was, sort of moving the ball in the direction of at least hopefully banning such data mining, but at least sort of giving students the options to opt in or out of data mining, and then have what's been phrased the right to be forgotten under I think is it GDPR? I forget the acronym, but some of the laws that were passed in the EU to help kind of mitigate data mining of big tech corporations. So, if we could integrate some oversight in which, these technology companies are limited into the ways in which they're data mining, data tracking, and thereby social engineering, the technologies could be, not only benign, but, entirely beneficial.
Right. So, just John Taylor Gatto. Okay. Can you explain a little bit to the people who he is and why he's important?
So John Taylor Gatto was he won the New York State Teacher of the Year award. He was a guy that was not an educator by training, and one day decided to do some substituting for a friend, I believe, and sort of turned that into a career in which he did very unorthodox things to get students to learn. Having not been sort of indoctrinated in the pedagogy of traditional teacher training, he was more creative about how he could get students to actually learn things on their own, right? And so, if he had, what they might have been phrased problem students, he'd find something they were interested. He'd give them some sort of maybe even let them out of class to go study whatever that might be at the library. Or I remember he tells a story of a young lady that wanted to be a swimmer. So what he did was he said, go to the pool. I want you to learn everything you can about what it takes to be a swimmer, everything it takes to manage a pool, a public pool, the chemistry, the economic, everything involved in that industry or that field. And part of what he discovered in the process of, wasn't just that the school system was sort of designed to sort of hamstring students' intellectual curiosity and sort of put them in a state of arrested development. That sort of led him. I mean, he sort of intuited that just by being in the system. But then he sort of went on a journey where he did a lot of research into the history of education, and he has the great book, the Underground History of American Education, in which he breaks down sort of the corporatization of education through robber baron funding. He looks at sort of the implementation of the behaviorist method of psychological conditioning, sort of replacing classical education in which students use the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric to learn how to think as opposed to being conditioned what to think. And so from there, he sort of became a key figure in what a movement known as unschooling. And so a lot of people that are trying to get their students out of sort of this ed tech system are looking to Gatto and unschooling, looking for ways to homeschool or to create community pods or co-ops in which people homeschool together to sort of to break away from that system.
Well, now, I've looked at some eighth grade tests from the late 1800s, and boy, I think a lot of college graduates would be hard pressed to pass some of those tests today. Can you explain a little bit how our education system has been dumbed down?
Yeah. So, right off the bat, we can just talk about literacy. And so one of the things that that I covered in my book has to do with the role of the Order of Skull and Bones in sort of bringing about all of these, what Charlotte called the deliberate dumbing down of America. And one of the things they are involved in was something this was known as the look-say method nowadays. Sometimes it's dovetails with something that's called whole language learning or whole word learning. And what it did was it got rid of traditional phonics. So if you in most Western languages, we have a phonetic alphabet. And so you can, each character in a word, or a word is consisted of various alphabetic characters which have different sounds. And if you learn the sounds and how they relate to prefixes, roots, and suffixes, you can essentially use context clues and inferences to read almost anything, even if you're unfamiliar with the vocabulary, versus in the East, the more pictographic or ideogram sort of languages, it's kind of there's no phonetic expression embedded in the textual symbol. So basically, you just have to memorize the concept or the idea associated with the whole character. So they basically took that method of literacy and imbued it onto phonetic languages. At first, it was started for the deaf, right? Because obviously phonetics isn't going to work for somebody that can't hear. So there was a lot of associations between pictures and the characters. But at some point, they decided that this was the best way for everybody to learn, and so they pretty much stopped teaching phonics. And so, along with not teaching phonics, they've also stopped teaching, traditional grammar in the sense of writing. So when I teach, oftentimes I get assigned what are called developmental courses. So at college level, a lot of times people don't come prepared for college level English. So they come in instead of English 101, they do English 98 or English 99. And this is, 98 could be close to an 8th grade, reading and writing level. So if you want to try to get them up to speed on grammar, you are discouraged and in fact, pretty much told not to at all do any kind of sentence diagramming, any kind of traditional parsing of grammar. And then along with that, the schools have not taught logic or rhetoric. I'll tell you that, it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I didn't get rhetoric until late in college.
Yeah.
Right. So, ethos, logos, pathos, right? The art of persuasion, right? Appealing to logic, emotion, or trust or character would be ethos. All these things combined sort of make it very difficult for the modern student to not only be able to parse language, whether textual or spoken, but also for them to be able to recognize just basic contradictions, right? The second law of logic, and then for them to be able to dispel rhetorical fallacies that are in corporate and government propaganda. That alone, I mean, without getting into numeracy, because as you know, trivium comes before quadrivium, right? Quality before quantity. So if you can't read, you're probably not going to get to the quadrivium if you can't get through the trivium, right?
Yep. I mean, I just love diagramming sentences. I thought that was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot from it. And I was very lucky that I had a teacher that was really into word roots, and really taught a lot of that. And I missed rhetoric. I didn't get rhetoric, didn't get a civics class, didn't get a logics class. I mean, it's criminal that we aren't teaching our children that. It really is,
Yeah.
So, I've been, we published Whitney Webb's One Nation Under Blackmail. And so I go to her website, Unlimited Hangout, quite often. And you've been having some articles on there. And why don't you tell us a little bit about Miss Hubbard and all this stuff you're digging into?
Yeah. So, this was funny because this part of the journey started almost, I guess it has to be 3 years ago. And I did not intend for it to be a 3-year process. But as you know, I'm very diligent, meticulous, maybe too much so in terms of explicating sometimes. But I wanted to take a break from writing about education, so I asked Whitney if there was any topics that she might want covered, just to take a break and then get back to education later. And so she mentioned maybe doing a sort of a profile piece on Barbara Marx Hubbard based on some of these memes she'd sent me that I guess been going around the internet, and one of the most prominent was this infamous quote from Barbara Marx Hubbard, in which she basically says that 1/4 of humanity will need to be culled, and so that the rest of the species can consciously evolve. And she refers to the people that are going to do this culling as the riders of the pale horse. So in the process of writing about that, I actually did. I have it right here. Actually did track down the actual manuscript that suggests that. Well, let me just give before I dive too much into that particular text. Let me
give some background.
Let's just talk. Yeah. Let's just talk about who is Hubbard. Okay, so this very prominent, let's just say, spokesperson for we could use the New Age umbrella here, but more accurately would be this philosophy or this theory of conscious evolution, which in my most recent research I have traced back the coining of that term appears to be Alice Bailey. Blavatsky had used similar terms, but not precisely that phrase. It has been perhaps used by somebody prior. But Hubbard never mentions Bailey, or at least I haven't come across her mentioning Bailey in any of the books that I've explicated. I've pretty much gone through most of her library, including some of this rare stuff that's unpublished. But it's also related to this concept of noetic evolution, or the noosphere, which she was inspired by a man named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He was a Jesuit priest, also a eugenicist. And he had this concept of the noosphere basically being the mind sphere, or the intellect or consciousness sphere of the universe. So it's derived from the term nous, which is a concept created by a pre-Socratic philosopher by the name of Anaxagoras. And so nous, or mind, or intellect, is sort of the metaphysical essence of the universe. And that energy sort of has gone through these iterations of first creating matter, then creating the biosphere, biological evolution, and then through the apex of the human creature, our evolution created this conscious mind that is more sentient than other animals. And through this mind, we were able to create, through science, we were able to create technologies that can actually augment and enhance our consciousness itself. So that noosphere, or that noetic energy, comes to know itself through human self-consciousness. And then that self-consciousness creates what Hubbard refers to as this new a cybernetic nervous system, a global nervous system. She literally says that it's basically the social media networks that we have today, that through that our consciousness is not only enhanced and moving towards sort of basically integrating the body with these technologies. So neurotech, biotech, basically transhumanism. And yes, she used that phrase many times in describing conscious evolution, but also sort of a collective species evolution. And so embedded in that is also sort of the use of human potential psychology to sort of self-actualize towards this apex moment. She was inspired. That element comes from her liaisons with Abraham Maslow. She was also funded by Lawrence Rockefeller, had connections to Mikhail Gorbachev, Maurice Strong at the through the World Future Society, also through the State of the World Forum, spoke at the United Nations, was very much a proponent of Malthusian principles and Malthusian versions of sustainable development. Was good friends with Jonas Salk. I think she said they were kindred souls, or they were mutants cut from the same gene pool, or some phrase like that. And he also had this concept of conscious evolution with this sort of Malthusian outlook that if we don't evolve our consciousness, and that also doesn't just mean the noosphere and technology, but if evolving new values, a new value system to go along with those technologies, that we would essentially hit this Malthusian crisis point, and we would sort of collapse as a civilization. So I mean, that's probably a good overview of all, because she's connected to a lot of different things. I think I put this, spread the table out decent there.
Yeah, that was quite a mouthful. So what does it mean to us peons here?
So what it means to us peons is that there's essentially a move to, I guess you could say, spiritualize the Malthusian eugenics of the technocratic fourth industrial revolution, that sort of spinning it so that, by integrating your biology and your psychology with neurotech and biotech, that's hooked up to this social credit system that's going to manage, what types of resources we can consume and how many babies we can have. By doing that, you are not only evolving the human species, but you are evolving your consciousness and your spirituality, and you're going to achieve this self-actualization. So it's sort of, I guess you could say, like Aldous Huxley said in his concept of the ultimate revolution. It's a system in which you will love your servitude, in which you will believe that, right, that being a slave is actually some sort of evolutionary transcendence.
Wow. Well, you mentioned new morals, and I have to think. Well, goodness gracious me, there's been people way before us that have laid down some pretty strong moral laws and how to walk down here. I mean, uh, what new do we have to learn to be more moral?
Yeah, well, definitely. I'm thinking right now of, the prodigal son and things. I mean, everything that changes stays the same. I mean, like stories like this, right? It doesn't matter how much technology you have, right? Like the sort of the transcendent values, the morals, the ethics that have sort of guided humanity. Those being transcendent are not subject to societal evolution or technological evolution, or cultural relativity, right, or some other subjective postmodern concept of how sort of uh, the roots that got you up to this branch can be cut off, essentially. Uh,
Okay. Bruce, you have any comments or questions here?
Quick an observation on this last part. It certainly, to me, it sounds. What do you think? The makings of a religion, or an unstated religion. Is it that kind of sweep that you see happening?
yeah, I definitely, that is, always been part of, all things New World Order theory, right? Global government, global economy, global religion, right? And so, the New Age movement, it's obviously that's a broad umbrella that has many different movements within it, and not everybody always agrees on stuff, but if we can use that term to sort of that within that, there always has been sort of this move towards, I guess you could call it, a sort of an ecumenist world religion, in which they sort of take all various aspects of all of the traditions of the world, all of the ancient religions of the world, and sort of repackage them into sort of this technocratic globalist system.
Thank you. That satisfied my question about that. And to get a little bit more practical, to what extent is, our digital reliance or slavery allowing them to capture us like this? And what role, or how imminent and how real is the threat that I see all over the place about things as specific as smart cities, 15-minute cities. How does that play into the sweep of these things? What have you seen or heard or know about the supposed drive to create or corral us into these smart cities or 15-minute cities?
Oh, honestly, that's not something that I've followed very closely that I could really expand on. I could tell you anecdotally that I have one of my good friends in California has told me that what she thinks is it's sort of moving towards transforming sort of the Bay Area or wherever she's at nearby there to a smart city is she notices that they're changing a lot of the stoplights to roundabouts because the smart cars if they both stop at the same time, nobody knows which one's first, and so they just get stuck. So they're creating these roundabouts, and she's saying they're getting rid of a lot of street parking, and they're making it like if you own a truck, you have to pay. It's like $3,000 to register even a pickup because they're gonna call it like a work truck, like you need a CDL to drive it or something.
Do
And
you, do you, do you
so
have do you have the impression that all this technocracy is the equivalent of a digital slavery?
Oh, yes, definitely. A cybernetic slavery, but one in which more than you are just pushed around by financial incentives, through a digital infrastructure. It's one in which behavioral engineering plays a key role in which, to use sort of the 1984 phrase, like it's not just to get you to comply, but built into the system is to get you to actually like it, actually, feel like you are evolving and you are doing your part for the greater good.
I see that with younger folks who have grown up with a phone in their hand. They literally, to all intents and purposes, have had a phone from birth. And I can see them loving that slavery, not even conceiving it as slavery, especially in light of what we've talked about earlier in this conversation, a lack of literacy, a lack of also real world involvement. I'm terrified by the drive for remote work and all the screen time in school and kind of like the demonization of the outdoors. It's all moving to me to think conspiratorially about it, to having us have these indoor, remote, virtual lives of total engagement just with a digital life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, and once upon a time, I haven't been back in a classroom since lockdowns, but when I used to go in there, it was a consistent phenomenon. So I go into the classroom, and sometimes if depending on the class, and there would be students there before you got there. The door was open, and they'd all be sitting there with the lights off, with the phones, just staring at this. So there's this blue glow, and everybody's faces down in the phones. And I'd come in the class, and I'd say, y'all know you can turn the lights on and talk to each other. I don't feel like you can't, I don't know if they thought, oh, it's my classroom, so you can't, nope, every day they would go in and they were content to,
I live down the street from an elementary to like a middle school age kind of school. So every morning and in the afternoon, I see the swarms coming to the building and then leaving the building. It's marching on the sidewalks. Little kids, like first grade with their heavy backpacks on. And it almost looks like a parody of a nightmare, but it's a living night. It's a 5 days a week. It's a nightmare to me. Someone made the observation, this is inhuman. It's unsustainable. Hopefully it's corrupt enough to collapse sooner than later. Point being, the future is analog. The future of humanity, maybe not in the next 50 or 100 years, but at some point, that's where some remnant is going to survive and maybe start the whole thing all over again of life on Earth.
Yeah, I just hope that that's not after, that doesn't arise out of a pile of skulls post Mad Max world. So I mean, because I don't see anybody like willfully or actively, I don't want to say anybody, but you have some pockets of people that want to, homestead and live communally and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
vast majority of people are not trying to go analog, right? They're not trying. People look at me like I'm crazy when they, do you want to download the app at the store? Or do you want to get the, do you want to scan this card so you can get a 10-cent discount? And I'm like, no, I don't want that. Like, I mean, the looks on their face is like they look at you like you're an alien. So but you're
That's
probably right that I mean that's definitely where people should be moving, and we should be trying to not use a lot of this stuff as much as possible. So
because, and this is my last thing, like the people who, like the three of us, who spent some portion of our life before smartphones, before this digital capture, soon we're going to be gone. And the young and the middle aged and then even the elders are all going to have been like where it's inconceivable to imagine not being attached like this. That's what I see.
yeah, and then in that future, potentially that's a world where print materials don't exist anymore, and who knows how things can get edited or rewritten,
This
in
is
the,
where I
in the
want Kris
online
Millegan
file.
to explode with something hopeful and optimistic and contrarian to the thrust of our last few dialogue exchanges.
No, I am quite hopeful because, again, everything digital isn't bad. Okay. And actually, digital can enhance quite a bit. Okay. I mean, again, I get to be a publisher because of the personal computer. Okay. And the internet. Okay. And again, you know, I, I, I just found a book about Psy-War. Okay, the history of Psy-War, conspiratainment, and the shattering of reality. Okay, and and I he's got Ed Lansdale on the cover, and that I says that guy's knows something there, and so I get a hold of him, and we had a chat, and he's in his 40s, but I'm in my 70s, and he's an honest researcher doing an honest book. Okay, he's not being captured by the conspiracy theory bullshit. Excuse my language. Okay, and because uh, I mean, there's people that can make a conspiracy theory out of anything. Okay, and now we've got AI, and so they're really gonna push for that. But then there's people like me and Jake and you, Bruce, that are pushing for some honest work. And I mean, I've got this book coming out, uh, Two World Wars and Hitler, who's responsible. Okay. And one thing that these guys did was they took three professors, okay, Professor Quigley, Professor Sutton, and Professor Paperta, okay, and took their information and put it together in a book that really shows the perfidy that's been, foisted upon us, okay. And I think that the more that we get out there and we show the actual perfidy, okay, and then the people they're going to try and spin that perfidy into their direction and blame this person for everything that again is BS. Okay, so uh, we've got uh, we've got some time to make this a better world for our children. We do because the information is out there, okay, of the perfidy, and the information is out there on what we need to do to have an honest society, have an honest government, and have an honest world. So, again, I'm still very hopeful. I mean, uh, my wife says, you read all this stuff and you're still hopeful. How does that happen? Well, because part of it because I read all this stuff. Okay, and because sometimes people are just reading this stuff. Okay, over here, and one of the things my daddy told me to do, he says, read it all. Read as much as you can because you need to see where the quote unquote evil people are trying to send you. Okay. And again, there's a lot more really good people, and a lot of the quote unquote evil people have just been misled, just like us. Okay. And they aren't card carrying, okay, you're a slave, you know. I'm really quite hopeful because um,
Mm.
this whole thing is coming to a head. I mean, so it'll all be interesting.
Yeah,
Any
and you
on
know,
that, John?
oh, I was just gonna say, I know I probably do. I am hopeful too. I'm hopeful too. I just tend to focus on what's the next problem I have to solve. And it's just why I am very critical. So, but it's maybe it's the martial artist in me. It's like I'm very aware of always all the bad things that can happen when I get in the ring. But I'm also getting in the ring, and I try to have fun when I do it. So,
Right. So now I know you're married. You have kids, John?
we're not able to have kids, so we don't have
Oh,
kids.
oh,
Yeah,
okay. Okay.
yeah.
Because I was going to ask you, how are you going to educate them? How, if you had kids, how would you educate them?
Well, I definitely would be homeschooling. I would like to think that I can make that happen. Of course, most of my work is at home, so I guess I probably could. I probably could make that happen somehow. It's hard to say because most of I would have to, that would be a learning curve starting with, a mind, an infant mind all the way through the formative years. I only really have experience teaching, either young adults or older adults. I mean, I've taught high school, middle school, this practicum stuff, but it was just here and there. So it's hard to say exactly methodologically what I would do, but I know that one of the simplest things I do is I would first of all probably try to keep them away from devices as much as possible for a very long time, early in the early stages. I would read to them and I would have the book and I would be pointing out as they make the sounds so that they can see the words, even as small as they're on my lap. I would do that. And any little toys that I got them would have some sort of educational thing embedded in it with alphabet blocks or some kind of, geometry little, remember you used to take the shapes and put them in match them to the whole stuff like that. That's what I would do early on. And then once the kids started to, show that, language abilities and things, I don't know where I'd go from here, but I think that's how I would start. They say that, data says that if students can't read if they're not up to par with reading or literacy around third or fourth grade, that's sort of determines if they don't get it by then, statistically, they don't get it. But what that also suggests is that early window in which really most of the learning actually is kind of organic. They just are absorbing it. So if you're putting them around things and asking them questions and making them think about the world around them, I think that if they had that basic literacy by third or fourth grade, that they probably are going to they'll be okay. They'll figure it out. I mean, you can help them and people can help them, but they'll have a decent, learning should be ultimately autodidactic. So that would be the end goal, and hopefully that would be the outcome.
Mm.
Okay. So, any last words here? Any question I didn't ask you, or something you'd like to say or talk about?
No, not that I can think of. So it's always good to hang out, and it's good to see you.
Okay, well, onwards to a better future for our children.
Right on.
Amen.